everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today we are joined by Rabbi Eliezer Krohn, the author of the brand new A Woman's Guide to Practical Halachah. Thank you, Rabbi Krohn, for being here at ArtScroll Studios for this conversation about your wonderful new sefer. I know I called it a book. It's really a sefer. It's a sefer designed to educate girls and women regarding halachos that are relevant to them specifically, and obviously you have an expertise in that area. So tell us a little about yourself and how you got into this area of practical halacha.
So thank you for having me. It's really an honor. It's a succos to be here. The way it started was, I was living in ArtScroll, really focusing on Nosham and Nezikin. Then I joined a Kachim Chabura in the Mir. I always say I had the best of both worlds. I was in the Mir learning Kachim. I came back to America. We lived in ArtScroll for 5 years. I came back and I joined a halacha keilim, and that really opened up my eyes to learning halacha be'iyun and getting it down to the practical halacha. So I was in the Pesach Clifton Community Keilim, where I live in Pesach, and it really brought halacha to life for me. My wife, it was actually interesting how I started teaching girls and teaching women. My wife teaches in the Beis Yaakov of Pesach in the high school. And they asked me to speak by the Chanukah Chagiga. I wasn't connected at all to the school, but my wife was, so they asked me to speak. I spoke for 20 minutes. I guess the principal, Rebbitzin Stern, Rav Meir Stern's Rebbitzin, liked the speech. And she called me a couple weeks later if I would substitute. So I was actually doing a bris in Queens that morning, so I wasn't able to make it back on time. But when I came back, so I said, I'm sorry, I'm not available. But when I came back, I asked my Rosh Kollel, I said, if they called me once, this was like in January, a couple of weeks after Chanukah, they'll probably call me again. Is this something I would be allowed to miss Kollel to start, to teach, to substitute, make a little bit of money on the side? So he said, is this something you see yourself doing in the future? I said, definitely. I feel like just practical halacha, clarity, clear is something I feel like I will be good at. He said, if this is an investment for the future, then you would be allowed to. I subbed like around 12 or 14 times till the end of the year. And then in the summer, she called me if I would teach halacha for the 11th grade in the Beis Yaakov Pesach. And I have a debt of gratitude to Rebbitzin Stern, who got me, who hired me for my first teaching job. And it took off from there. I started teaching in the New York Seminary by Rebbitzin Asaf for seminary age. I teach now in Rinas Beis Yaakov in Edison in high school. And I teach to married women, 3 or 4 different classes during the week for halacha, practical halacha, through different shuls and through different groups of women. And Torah Anytime just spread everywhere. And Baruch Hashem, I get emails and phone calls from all over the world teaching halacha and trying to help people, to actual practical halacha.
So going back a bit, I should have mentioned at the outset of our interview, when people hear Rabbi Eliezer Krohn, they probably wonder, and the answer is yes. You're related to the famous Rabbi Krohn. You're a son of Rabbi Paysach Krohn. So tell us a little about your upbringing. I know you grew up in Queens, right? Sure. So talk about that a little, growing up in the home of your parents and the impact that they had on you going forward. You are a male as well, which is apparently a family tradition.
I always say it runs in the blood. Yeah.
Under the blood. So you and your brothers. So talk about that for a moment.
So before I just talk about my parents, it was interesting you mentioned that, people ask, are you related? So in the beginning, I wasn't used to being spoken to in third person. Everyone was used. Like one time a girl asked me, what does Rabbi Krohn think about this? I'm like, why'd you ask him? I'll give you his phone number. I'm like, no, I'm like, you. I'm like, oh, me? Oh, okay, fine, me. But yes, I have the great succos of being a son of the one and only Rabbi Krohn and Mrs. Krohn. Growing up in their house, it was, besides that they're amazing parents, were and are amazing parents, but they're both people that are just giving over to the klal, especially in regards to education. My mother has been in Shevach High School for many, 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 many years, a teacher in Navi and Chumash and Sichas Musar. And my father, for his speeches, it's also educating. It's inspiring, but it's also education in a major way. And I grew up that we live for the klal. We live for others, and it takes a lot of time. It takes time sometimes away from the family, but it's a family project together, inspiring others and teaching others and guiding others. and it's the biggest chus in the world. It's the biggest chus in the world, and the shiurim, the women that come to the shiur and Torah anytime, it's a partnership. It's all a partnership, like ArtScroll knows. Yeah, you could have a great author, but they need somebody to get it out there, and that's what makes ArtScroll so special. But I grew up in a house where it was always involved in the klal, whether it's advice or Practical Halachah or teaching, and it's something that's just ingrained. I think I'm one of five. I'm the youngest of five, and Baruch Hashem, we're all married. So from the 10 of us, I think 7 out of 10 are in education. So it's something that's kind
of
that we were raised with, ingrained in us, and something that we try.
Now, where did you go to yeshiva?
So I went to yeshiva went to Tveres Moshe in Kew Gardens and Shara Torah, which is right up the block from my parents' house. Then it was in the Mir.
So you learned in Shara Torah all the way?
All the way. I mean, 2 years Beis Medrash.
I
was by Reb Shalom Spitz for 2 years in Beis Medrash. So 4 years high school, then 2 years Beis Medrash. Then I went to the Mir for 3 years. Rabbi Elephant, my Rebbe, and Rabbi Sharieli. And then I went back to Shara Torah. And then I went to Rav Kalman Epstein. I was very close to Reb Zelig Epstein. He was my Masada Kedushin. But I was very close to Reb Zelig, and I was still very close to Rabbi Elephant and Rabbi Sharieli and Reb Nosson Tzvi. Someone, these are all pictures in my dining room and on my desk, and I'm very, very close to all of them. And but I was really only in 2 yeshivas my whole life, Shara Torah and the Mir. After the Mir, I went back to Shara Torah. I didn't go to Lakewood. I have, Baruch Hashem, I have the schus of having smicha from Beis Medrash Gavaya of Lakewood, but I never learned in Lakewood. I got permission from Rabbi Rucham Olshan to take the Fahers through Beis Medrash Gavaya, but I was already living in Pesach, and I never learned in Lakewood. I do brisim in Lakewood, but I never learned in Lakewood Yeshiva.
Did you always have an interest in halacha, even in Shara Torah and the Mir, or did that come later?
Actually not. It wasn't. When I got engaged, so I told my father, I don't really know halacha. So my father said, I'll take care of it. My father calls ArtScroll, and he ordered me all of Reb Simcha ben Cohn's Sfarim.
Classic
Sfarim. Right, and clear and practical, and footnotes on the bottom, which is also great. And I was reading them, and then after I got married, I said to my wife, does our crockpot have silver foil? Of course it does. You don't think I know it? My wife knew more than me, which is a lot of times the case when it comes to Bachram and girls from Beis Yaakov. So, but that's why I cherish teaching Beis Yaakov girls and seminary-age girls, because they're the foundation, a lot of time, of the house and the kitchen, and so much halacha goes through them. Where do they learn it? From their high school rebbeim, and their seminary rebbeim. And for me to be able to have the schus, to be the one to give them that foundation, to me that's priceless.
And I'd love for you to address the sometimes a misnomer. People don't realize what teaching halacha in a Beis Yaakov entails. It's not simple. You really have to know your stuff.
You have to know your stuff.
You have to be on your toes.
But you have to prepare. I have friends that are Talmidei Chachamim, and they tell me that they would never be able to teach in a girls' school. I always tell the girls and the women that 50%, maybe even more, of my preparation is what not to say. Is what not to say. Meaning you could open up an English Sefer or open up a Mishnah Berurah with a Dirsha Mishnah Berurah and a Piskei Teshuvos, and you start giving all different complicated, it's not relevant to them, and it just confuses them. So you have to filter out what's not important, what's not relevant, but you have to know it. Because all you need is one girl to raise her hand and ask an honest, good question. Oh, but what happens if... So you should know the answer. If not, you'll get back to them. So you have to know it, and it could be in your notes, but you don't say it unless somebody raised their hand. But you can't obligate them to know it these random... And that's what I really tried for this Sefer, Bez Hashem, to accomplish. That to only talk about the common cases that are normal. What does a girl, what does a married married woman need to know for her daily life? And there's a phenomenal Sefer called Halachos Bas Yisrael. And it's translated in English. But I always say that that's a halacha sefer for men about women. And there's a lot of cases there that don't happen very often. And it's too much.
I was going to ask you about Halachos Bas Yisrael. Is there anything comparable to your sefer that you're familiar with?
I don't think so. That it's written for girls, meant for girls. It has small footnotes on the bottom, just in case their father, their husband, their brother, their son wants to look into it. Where did he get that from? So I have the Marmakonos on the bottom, but very short. It's not long footnotes. It's very, very short, just if someone wants to look into it, just to see the source. But it's written for women. And that's why, we mentioned before that I wanted the Sefer to be out like 2 or 3 years ago already. Right. But Gedalia Zarowitz is such a genius and such a master that he said we have to have women read it through first. So the first thing Rav Gedalia told me was that you can't just write a halacha sefer. Nobody knows who you are. You don't have that reputation yet. You need a Rav that's going to look through it. So my father thought of Rabbi Oelbaum from Kew Garden Hills. Rabbi Noach Isaac Oelbaum, a fantastic idea. He went through it twice, and he gave his stamp of approval, corrected a few things, fixed a few things, and he was the first one. Then we had Rabbi Leshkowitz, Rabbi Naftali Leshkowitz, who was on the phone with last week, but I was on the phone with him for hours and hours. He went through everything. A lot of corrections. Corrections is, I don't know if it's the right word.
Nuances,
but
maybe
nuances and
right.
clarity and to add and what to subtract. And I have a lot of akar satayv to Rabbi Leshkowitz for many, many hours.
And like you pointed out before, so much of it is what not to include.
Is what not to say. Like this
right.
it's not relevant and to put what to put in, what to take out. And after that, 4 women went through it. Mrs. Eisner, Mrs. Dick, Mrs. Finkelman, and Mrs. Stern. All 4 of which I didn't know in advance.
4 of ArtScroll's premier editors.
Right, okay.
And you don't get better than them.
Right, so that's exactly what my father said. I said, Mrs. So-and-so now again is looking through it. My father said, Eliezer, don't complain. These are the top. ArtScroll's giving you the top. You should be happy. And they went through with a fine comb, and I was on the phone with them also for hours and hours, each one, and fine-tuning to make it clear. If it's not clear, it's not ArtScroll. So it has to be clear, and we went through it, and then Rabbi Leshkowitz went through it again. We were on the phone last week, and just to make it concise and clear, me and you, we think it's clear. I mean, we just for example, I wrote, you make the bracha on the esrog, so you hold it upside down, and then you make the bracha and you turn it right side up. So Mrs. Stern said, well, what is upside down? I said, well, upside down, of course, the pitum is down. She's like, you think everybody knows that, but maybe there's a girl out there, about Tshuva, doesn't know what does upside down mean.
Excellent.
I never thought of that. So, and sure enough, I checked in another English sefer, and they wrote, pitum down. To make sure that it's clear. So it has to be clear, and that's
not to assume, not to take anything for granted.
That people.
But it reminds you of something that we quote here at ArtScroll quite a lot in the name of Rabbi Meir Zlotowitz, that when you're putting out a project, a book, make sure that it's good enough that no one will ever put one out like that again.
Right.
Meaning this should be the definitive, authoritative sefer on this particular topic. In this case, it's halacha for women. You want to make sure that it's authoritative. Like you said, you had it reviewed by Rabbi Oelbaum. And you also want to make sure that it's clear, so that's well understood, and also that it's comprehensive enough that it addresses all the different topics. Which brings me to my next question. Is there a particular area of halacha that you found in teaching girls that either they need more kind of reinforcement? Is there a particular area that you focus on? Is it Hilchos Shabbos? Because later on, once they're married, it becomes so relevant. Well, what's an area of halacha that you find that you're accomplishing so much by really giving them that boost?
So the answer to that question, I really feel, is Hilchos Tefillah. Tefillah specifically for girls. There are a lot of differences between men and women when it comes to the area of Hilchos Tefillah. One of the classes that I have the Succos of teaching by Rabbi Asaf in the New York Seminary is Ha'isha B'Halacha. The differences between men and women in halacha, and really the first half of the semester, the first half of the year, the first semester, we focus on Hilchos Tefillah. What are they obligated to daven? What are they not obligated to daven? Meaning me and you, we go to shul, we say everything, of course. Right. But when a woman is home and she's busy with her children, she doesn't have time to say everything. So what is she obligated and what is only voluntary? The answer to that question is going to decide, okay, I have 12 minutes to daven. What should I daven? I can't say everything. So what you have to go daven in order of the siddur. But what do I choose to say? What do I choose to leave out? The answer to that question is, what are you obligated and what are you not obligated? And also, how late in the day can you say it? If you could say Birchas HaShachar all day long, Mishnah Berurah brings an opinion, you could say Birchas HaShachar in the afternoon, even at night. So if you have 12 minutes to daven, don't choose Birchas HaShachar. You could say that this afternoon. It's better to choose Pesukah de Zimra. So we go through all of Hilchos Tefillah from Matoivu, Adain Olam, Yigdal, Birchas HaTorah, Birchas HaShachar, Karbonos, Pesukah de Zimra, what they're obligated, what they're not obligated, and when, how late in the day are they able to say it. And Hilchos Tefillah Tefillah is one of the mitzvahs that a woman cherishes so
Sure.
much.
I was going to say,
you got it. Yeah, they have to know
it is
the
an
halachos.
area that women connect to.
For sure.
Tefillah is very
Right.
powerful, and so that's tremendously instructive.
Right, and I
Because
have
like
a whole section on hilchos tefillah in the sefer, and some of them are halachos that a lot of women are not aware of. Such as how birchos krishma, not krishma itself, the birchos krishma, yitzar and avarabba, and then v'yatziv afterwards. How late in the day can someone say that? So the Shulchan Aruch says one thing, the Bir Halacha says something else. The Bir Halacha argues on the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says only till 4 hours into the day. The Bir Halacha says if it was an einis, which usually it is, otherwise why wouldn't they have said it, they could do till chatzos. So many paiskim, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Reb Vosner, the Chazon Ish, Reb Chaim Kanevsky, they say that for a girl, it's only till 4 hours into the day. That's which is Zman Tefillah. So I explained to them, what does that mean? Zman Tefillah, 4 hours is not 4 times 60 minutes. I explained to them, Shosh Manias. And after that time, you don't say Birchas Krishma. So Mrs. Dick had never heard of that halacha. And some of the other women did not. And I said, it is a machlokes, that's clear. And I write the footnotes where someone could look more into it. But that's how I would come out and paskin in class. And that's an eye-opener. You wake up late on a Sunday. Right. You got to know what time it is. You have to know what time. So that's something that a lot of girls don't realize. And true dose in general. When a woman is busy with her children, she doesn't have to daven Shmona Esrei. Good, so I don't have to daven. A lot of women know that halacha. If I'm busy with my children, I don't have to daven. But at least say Birchas HaTorah, at least say Birchas HaShachar, then you fulfilled the chiyuv of tefillah according to the Rambam, and not according to the Ramban, but at least according to the Rambam.
Many women may assume that if I missed it,
I missed it. No, but it takes 1 or 2 minutes to say Birchas HaTorah. Then you accomplish, at least according to the opinion of the Rambam, HaShevach, HaBakasha, and Ha'ida. So, halachas like that, excite me. To give it over, and now the girls, they never realized that.
Because you have a great opportunity here. You're empowering the girls and women to know how much more they could do, even in what we would call compromised circumstances. Right. And compromised not in a bad way, where they're taking care of families, doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So that's tremendously helpful. Any other things that come to mind? Because this is really interesting.
You mentioned before about my father. One thing I did want to mention about my father, because I didn't want it to come out, looking that we gave over, my parents just give over to the klal, and as if chas v'shalom, any of the children, suffered. And I'll tell you my favorite Rabbi Krohn story. Okay, and I guarantee you don't know it because it's not in any of my father's books.
Okay.
And I try to imitate this. I try to copy this. I remember one time I called my father. I just talked to him about something. It wasn't something so important. I just called him, and I remember where exactly I was. I called him, and I always call my father on his cell phone because he could be home, but chances are he's not home. So this way, I'm safe. I just call his cell phone. I called him one time. This happened about 10, 11 years ago. Called him on his cell phone, and he was home. Happened to be he was home. So I started talking to him, and I hear the home phone ring in the background. So my father says, okay, hold on 1 second. He gets the phone, and he hangs up. Within 10, 15 seconds, he hangs up. I said, who was that? He said, it was someone from Eretz Yisrael, but I told him I'll call back later. So I said, you could really get the phone. It's not so important. I'll call you back later. He said, no, it's fine. I'm on the phone with you. Fine. I'm talking to him for another minute or two. The phone rings again. He picks up the phone, and he hangs up right away. I said, who is that? It was someone from South Africa, but I told him I'll call back later. I said, Tad, the next time the phone rings, you could get it. I'll call. We'll talk later. It's not so important. My father said, Eliezer, you're the most important person to me. Everybody else could wait. To me, you're the most important. And I repeat, we weren't talking about something so time sensitive. But Baruch Hashem, someone who's involved in halacha and teaching and brisim, as you mentioned, and answering shilas and writing, and you get busy. But I always try, and my wife gets a lot of credit because she does so much in the house that lets me learn and answer the phone and write and notes. But I try to just imitate my father. That first comes the family. First is the family. And I read the biography on of Meir Zlotowitz, and I think there was a whole chapter, but I think a section spoke about over there how family was first.
Unbelievable.
Family was first.
Sure.
And you give over the Messiah to your children, and my kids, Baruch Hashem, know a lot of halacha as they hear my phone calls and discussions around the table. But they know that they need to come first. That's
now a lot of the girls and women who you teach. Do you find that they're calling you Later on, Basa B'chalav Shailas.
I am on the phone nonstop. I'm mamish nonstop with the onion, with the fleishika knife, and the milchika pan, and because I teach kosher kitchen to the married women. I teach it in 12th grade in Rinas Beis Yaakov. Hilchos Shabbos, I teach the lamatas malachos, and I'm Baruch Hashem on the phone really all the time. Sometimes I just have to call back. And I'm on, and a lot of the girls, they call me for shidduchim questions. One of the classes I teach is halachos of lashon hara by shidduchim. What are you allowed to say? What are you not allowed to say? What are you obligated to say? And at what point? And the girls call me for halacha, but also for guidance. Baruch Hashem, bli ayin hara, 3 girls just got engaged within the past month that I helped throughout the dating process. I was on the phone with them for a long time. It was the 4th girl that I'm helping, but I helped her say no to the boy, which is also for her was the right thing. Right. I always tell the girls, if I'm their Rebbe, I'm their Rebbe for life. And they could call me whenever they want. They don't have to, but they could call me for life. I give them my cell phone, and I can try.
They're fortunate to have that.
We try, and we try to give guidance. My father all the time is on the phone guiding people in regards to shalom bayis and shidduchim and chinuch. My father always talks about it around the Shabbos table. Of course, he doesn't say any names, but he says, I was called with this question this week. What would you think? What would you guys say? So we were raised and grown up to seeing situations and what would my father have said in certain cases. We have a Thursday night conference call.
I've heard about this.
You've heard about this? Yeah, the Zaidi conference call. Hanan said it? So,
no, tell our viewers.
So 10:30, Thursday nights, I'm not giving out the phone number because it's only for family. We have a conference call, and they don't take attendance, but we try to go on as much as we can. My father always, tells over what happened that week to him and where he went, and always these type of halacha questions, which I like to get involved in, but just things that happened to him during the week, and what would we say? And I'm the youngest, besides the grandchildren, so I'm older than them, but from the siblings, I'm the youngest. So I like to talk last. I let my brother, my brothers-in-law, my sisters, they all have what to say. We're all Krohns. So we married a Krohn. So we all have what to say. So, but we're trained. We're just trained like that to try, to help others and be able to see the big view, the big picture.
You spoke before about passing on the Messiah, and that segues very well to Mila. Your father's been a male for many, many years. Yes. When did you first realize that, you also want to carry on that Messiah? And tell us a little about that experience, being a male while really being busy. It's hard being a male, going out in the morning, having a teaching schedule, taking care of the family. Talk about that.
A lot of my teaching doesn't start till 11 o'clock in the morning because I can't confirm, I can't guarantee that I'll be there at 9:15. The married woman is early in the morning, but then I could cancel on. The past 2 Wednesday mornings, I canceled my shir because my brother is a Rebbe in Waterbury, so I've gotten Baruch Hashem a lot of brisim in Waterbury. So the past 2 Wednesdays, my bris was in Waterbury, so I had to cancel the shir. This Wednesday, Bez Hashem, is in Teaneck. I have to see how the timing works. But I knew since I was a little child that I wanted to be a male. I was 7 or 8 years old. I decided I wanted to be a male. My father's a 5th generation male, so I'm a 6th generation Baruch Hashem. People ask me, who's a better male, you or your father? So I joke. I say, what do you mean? My father's a 5th generation male. I'm a 6th generation male. But I knew since I'm a little child, I used to go around with my father to brisim. And it's an experience because my father always says there's 2 parts to being a good male. Number 1 is doing a good job, and number 2 is everything else. Explaining everything, answering the questions, checking the baby before and after, showing confidence and being there for them and calming them. And that's all part of the teaching. That's all part of the training. When you learn from your father, you get to see it up close. I used to walk with my father from Kew Gardens to Hillcrest, to Kew Garden Hills, or Forest Hills on Shabbos. I remember on Yom Kippur, in our slippers, we walked to Hillcrest once for a bris. And for me, it's so special. That's why we moved to Pesach. There was no male that lived in Pesach. We moved to Pesach 14 and a half years ago. Lakewood didn't need another young male. So we moved to Pesach, but there was no male. And my father gave me a lot of brisim. My brother-in-law, Ephraim Perlstein, is also a male. We worked together, us 3. It's phenomenal. It's amazing. And my father has helped me so much. And it's not enough to be a good male. You need a foot in.
Right.
And my father gave me brisim, in the beginning. And still, when he gets called for 2 in one day, we mix and match and we check babies for each other, before and after. it's such a schus. And my father never forced me. I have one brother. I didn't force him to be a mile. He always wanted to be a rebbe, and I always wanted to be a mile.
Right.
And I have 4 boys, Kanai Nahara. I'm not going to force them.
Right.
If one of them does, great. But I'm not going to force them.
But here you are carrying on the Krohn legacy, the Krohn Messiah and Mila, and you're also, like you alluded to at the beginning of our conversation, carrying on the Krohn Messiah and legacy of being there for the klal, educating, sharing from what you have with others, enriching their lives. So we'd like to wish you a mazel tov on the release of the new sefer, a beautiful, beautiful volume, which I'm sure is going to be well received, and wish you continued hatzlacha in educating, inspiring, uplifting. May you do so for many more years.
Amen. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here.